A routine traffic stop spirals out of control when a racist cop wrongfully arrests a black woman, unaware she's a powerful judge. What happens next will shake his entire department. Watch the shocking turn of events, subscribe, share, and comment where you're tuning in from. It was a sunny afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, and Officer Mike Peterson was patrolling the streets, his sunglasses low on his nose as he scanned the sidewalks. Mike was known around the precinct for his quick judgments and gut instincts, but not for the right reasons. He believed he could size up anyone in seconds, and his assumptions often landed him in murky waters. Today, as he drove past a small cafe near the courthouse, he spotted a black woman sitting in her car, sipping coffee and reading a thick binder of papers. Her car was spotless, a silver luxury sedan that gleamed in the sunlight. She looked focused, her dark curls pinned back neatly, wearing a tailored burgundy dress. To Mike, she didn't look like she belonged there. He slowed his patrol car and parked behind her. His instincts told him something was off. Without waiting for backup or even a valid reason, he flipped on his lights and approached her car. The woman noticed him but didn't seem surprised. She calmly rolled down her window and looked up at him with a polite but firm expression. "Afternoon, officer," she said, her voice steady. "License and registration," Mike barked, his tone sharp. He didn't return her greeting, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for a reason to escalate. She reached into her purse, moving slowly and deliberately, and handed over her ID and registration. "Is there an issue?" she asked. Mike glanced at the ID. Her name was Judge Naomi Brooks. He barely registered it, his mind already jumping to conclusions. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "This your car?" "Yes, it is," Naomi replied, her tone calm but firm. "And I'm reviewing case files. I have a hearing at the courthouse in an hour." Mike didn't believe her. To him, she was just another person trying to act like they were above the law. He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "Step out of the car," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Naomi hesitated for a second, her brow furrowing, but she opened the door and stepped out. She stood tall, her posture dignified, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, crossing her arms. "What's this about?" Mike didn't answer. Instead, he began circling her car, peering inside through the windows. He saw nothing suspicious, but that didn't stop him. He opened the door and started searching through her belongings without asking. "Do you have a warrant?" Naomi asked, her voice sharp now. "Because if you don't, this search is illegal." Mike shot her a smirk, his hands rifling through her briefcase. "I don't need a warrant when I've got probable cause," he said smugly. "Probable cause for what?" Naomi asked, her voice steady but with an edge of irritation. "Having coffee and reading legal documents?" Mike ignored her, pulling out a folder filled with case files. He flipped through the pages, looking for something that would justify his actions. When he found nothing, his frustration grew. "You're under arrest," he said abruptly, reaching for his handcuffs. "For what?" Naomi asked, her voice incredulous. "Obstruction of justice," Mike replied, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. A small crowd had started to gather, their phones out, recording the scene. Naomi stayed composed, even as Mike led her to his patrol car. She didn't resist, but her eyes burned with quiet determination. As she sat in the back of the car, her hands cuffed in front of her, Naomi's mind raced. She wasn't just any judge, she was one of the youngest and most respected in the state. She knew the law inside and out, and she knew Mike's actions were not only unethical but blatantly illegal. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had been profiled, disrespected, or silenced because of their race. Naomi wasn't going to let this slide. She was going to make sure Mike Peterson learned a lesson he'd never forget. At the station, Naomi sat calmly in the holding area, her hands still cuffed. She observed the officers around her, their chatter and laughter echoing through the room. Mike stood at the desk, filling out paperwork with a self-satisfied smirk. To him, this was just another day on the job, another person put in their place. Naomi, however, wasn't an ordinary citizen. She had no intention of letting this humiliation go unanswered. She glanced at the clock. Her hearing was in less than an hour, and she knew people would start asking questions when she didn't show up. A senior officer, Sergeant Harris, walked into the station, his brows furrowed. He glanced at Naomi, then at Mike. "What's going on here?" he asked. Mike looked up, still smug. "Routine arrest. Found her acting suspicious near the courthouse. She got mouthy, so I brought her in." Sergeant Harris frowned, his eyes narrowing. Suspicious? Did you find anything illegal? Mike hesitated. No, but... Harris interrupted, his tone sharp. Do you even know who that is? Mike shrugged, trying to play it off. Some lawyer or something. Harris sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. That's Judge Naomi Brooks. She's presiding over one of the biggest cases in the state right now. What were you thinking? Mike's face paled. A judge, he stammered. Yes, a judge, Harris said firmly. And if you've violated her rights, this is going to be a nightmare for all of us. Before Mike could respond, Harris walked over to Naomi, his demeanor apologetic. Judge Brooks, I'm so sorry for this misunderstanding. Let me get those cuffs off. Naomi stood as Harris unlocked the handcuffs. She rubbed her wrists but kept her composure. Thank you, Sergeant. But this goes far beyond a misunderstanding. Your officer profiled me, conducted an illegal search, and arrested me without cause. I hope you understand the gravity of this situation. Harris nodded, his expression grim. I do, and I assure you this will be handled internally. Naomi's gaze didn't waver. Internally isn't enough. This is systemic, and I intend to address it publicly. Mike, now visibly sweating, stepped forward. Judge Brooks, I didn't mean. Naomi held up a hand, silencing him. Save it, Officer Peterson. You didn't just target me. You targeted what I represent. Justice, fairness, and the law. And you failed on every count. She turned to Harris. I'll be leaving now. But rest assured, I'll be filing a formal complaint. This department needs to understand that accountability isn't optional. Harris nodded, his shoulders slumping. Understood, Judge. Naomi walked out of the station, her head held high. Outside, reporters were already gathered, having caught wind of her arrest. Cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust toward her as she stepped into the sunlight. Judge Brooks, what happened inside? One reporter asked. Naomi paused, her expression resolute. Today, I was reminded of why I do what I do. This wasn't just about me. It was about the systemic issues that affect so many people in this country. Profiling, abuse of power, and disregard for the law have no place in our society. I'll be addressing this matter through the proper channels, and I won't stop until real change happens. The reporters erupted with questions, but Naomi didn't stay to answer. She had a hearing to attend, and she wasn't going to let Mike Peterson's actions derail her work. Back at the courthouse, Naomi entered the courtroom to a wave of whispers. Word of her arrest had spread quickly, but she maintained her focus. She presided over the hearing with the same poise and authority she always did, showing the world that nothing could shake her commitment to justice. Meanwhile, at the station, Mike's actions were under intense scrutiny. An internal investigation was launched, and Naomi's formal complaint ensured that his behavior wouldn't be swept under the rug. The department faced public backlash, with community leaders and activists calling for reform. Mike was suspended without pay pending the investigation. The once confident officer now found himself at the center of a media storm, his actions condemned by the very people he was supposed to protect. Weeks later, Naomi stood before a packed room at a community meeting. She had organized the event to address systemic issues in law enforcement and to push for better training and accountability measures. This isn't just about one officer, she said, her voice firm but compassionate. It's about a culture that allows bias and abuse to go unchecked. We have the power to change that, but it starts with us holding the system accountable. The crowd erupted in applause, inspired by her determination. For Naomi, the incident with Mike Peterson wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reminder of the work that still needed to be done and a call to action for everyone who believed in justice. For Mike, it was a lesson he'd never forget, a reminder that power without accountability is a dangerous thing, and that no one is above the law.